Hi everybody and welcome to a complete redo of one of our most popular video series. It's the 3 videos on the relative clauses and the relative pronouns. We've added lots of new examples and we also changed the design a little bit. Now part 1, the video that you're watching here at the moment, gives you an introduction into the topic, basic information about the relative clauses and relative pronouns. Video 2, then, we have a tour through the English relative pronouns like who, whose, whom, and so on. And in part 3, we will talk about the different types of relative clauses, the defining and non-defining relative clauses, and also the so-called contact clause. But part 1, the one that you're watching here, is an introduction into the topic. Now, first of all, we would like to answer the question, what is a relative clause? Here are 2 sentences for you. That man over there was talking to me. I don't know him. And if you take these 2 and combine them, make one out of the 2, then your sentence looks like this. I don't know the man who was talking to me. I don't know the man who was talking to me. And the who was talking to me is your relative clause. Now let's have a closer look. Now, first of all, this relative clause starts with who, and who here is a relative pronoun. And it's pretty obvious when there's a relative pronoun in a clause, then also this clause becomes a relative clause. Now, this relative pronoun refers to the man, and it's giving information about that person. The relative clause gives you information about people, about animals, or about objects. And here the information is, the man was talking to me. And you want to remember that relative clauses are subordinate clauses. A subordinate clause cannot stand alone. If you have a look at that sentence here, the whole sentence, and you take away the main clause, and the main clause is I don't know the man, then who was talking to me is left over. And in a positive statement, it's grammatically not correct. It doesn't make any sense. Who was talking to me maybe is a question, but that's not the point here. So take the main clause, and the main clause is I don't know the man. I don't know the man, full stop, can stand alone. Take it away, and the subordinate clause is left over, and your subordinate clause cannot stand alone. It's then grammatically not correct anymore, and that makes it the subordinate clause. And these 3 things you're looking for when you are looking for a definition. A relative clause is a subordinate clause. Who was talking to me? It gives information about a person, about a thing, or maybe about an animal. Here, information about the man, and the information is he was talking to me. And it is usually introduced by a relative pronoun, which here is who, and the who refers to the man. I say it's usually introduced because I can tell you right away, you will find out in video number 3 that there are relative clauses where you can leave out the relative pronoun. But so far, we keep it there. So we need a subordinate clause giving information about people, objects, animals, and a relative pronoun. And then we have a relative clause. And with the relative pronouns we continue now. What function do relative pronouns have in the relative clause? Here's your sentence. The woman who phoned me last night was my mother. The woman who phoned me last night was my mother. Now the who phoned me last night is your relative clause, and you see right away that it's tucked nicely into the middle of my main clause. The woman was my mother is my main clause. Who phoned me last night is my relative clause, my subordinate clause. Phoned is the verb, obviously, which makes who the subject, because it's who phoned, subject, verb. That me back here is the object of my relative clause. So please remember, relative pronouns here, who, can be the subject of the relative clause. Who phoned, subject, verb. Now I'm taking that sentence and I'm changing it a little bit. The woman whom I phoned last night was my mother. The woman whom I phoned last night was my mother. Now I can tell you right away that who is also possible here, but the whom problem I'm talking about in the second video. Now, whom I phoned last night is my relative clause, and again it's snuggled nicely into the middle of my main clause. The woman was my mother. Phoned is still my verb, obviously. But my subject is the I now, because it's subject, verb, I phoned, which makes whom the object of the relative clause. Whom I phoned, object, subject, verb. And here, my relative pronoun, my whom, is the object of the relative clause. So please remember, and this will be very important in video number 2, relative pronouns can be both subject and object of the relative clause. And now we're almost finished with part number 1. I have a little piece of information left. Have a look at those 2 sentences. I don't like the table that stands in the kitchen. I don't like the chairs that stand in the kitchen. And you notice that the table here is singular and the chairs here is plural. And in both cases, your relative pronoun is that. Now, in the languages that I know outside of English, which are German and French, the relative pronoun takes different forms. There is a singular and a plural form, and there's also a form for masculine and feminine nouns. Not in English. And this is good news, because no change, there is no change that has to be applied here. Relative pronouns refer to both singular and plural nouns. They stay the same. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, that's it for part number 1. Thanks for watching. Now I suggest you continue with part number 2, where we will give you a tour through the English relative pronouns. So see you when you get there, and have a nice time.